Well, now we will be talking about the electoral reforms in Nigeria, even though, well, there are recent suggestions. There have been some previously. To take us through some of those, let's go to Mark.
Thank you, Chamberlain. We have with us in the studio Senator Gaya, who's the Chairman Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission. You're welcome, Senator.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Good morning. And we also have with us Mr. Tanko, who is a former presidential candidate, the National Conscience Party. You're also welcome, sir.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Nigerians.
Well, there's been a lot of talk in recent times, distinguished, around the registering political parties that have not won elections or that have not made their mark in the elections. We already have, I mean, from what we see and from what a lot of Nigerians are saying, there are a lot of political parties, perhaps too many political parties. At the last count, there were about 91. There were about 70, over 70 presidential candidates in the last, just the concluded general elections that happened this year. And people are saying perhaps it would be better for us to be able to streamline and get something that will be manageable, both for the electoral body and also for Nigerians to be able to make their choices in a very clear manner. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, first of all, as Chairman Senate Committee on INEC, during my speech on after the inauguration, we invited the chairman and staffs of INEC. And during my speech, my opening remarks, I mentioned that there is a need to trim down our political parties to a minimum of 5 or maximum of 5. And I have said this for 2 reasons. One, that the number of political parties are too many. We're not even talking of 91 now. Recently, another party went to court that INEC has delayed their registration, and the court granted ordered INEC to give them registration, to register them. So which means now we're talking of 92. So by the time we go like this, maybe before the next election, we'll be going to over 100 plus. And too many things, like there are conditions of the party. After elections, what are the conditions for party to be registered? For example, like the conditions, any party can be registered, but after an election, the party should be deregistered if they could not qualify. Like I'm talking about the example of the issue of getting 25% in a presidential election in a state. Virtually all the 2 parties were able to get 25%. So qualified in that position. That means PDP and APC. The other parties didn't qualify in that criteria, the first one. The second criteria is that when parties win election at the state level as governor or senator, yeah, some parties have now won election. YPP has a senator and Abga has a governor and so on. So definitely, this we can mention there are very few. We may end up really, when you look properly, you find there are not more than 5 or so political parties. And for reasons that, like, as you said, the presidential election, there are about over 70 candidates for presidential election is uncalled for. We spend the taxpayers' money. For example, like if you are having an election for the president, and they're just a sheet of paper like this, 5, which is just 5 number, so the size of paper will be small. When you have 92, the size of paper will be big. And therefore, if you are spending 5,000 naira of the taxpayers' money for a small piece of paper, it means you now multiply it by 92, and then multiply it by 25 million voters or so. So it's a huge sum of money by just spending too much of that. And then secondly, that these parties, some of them have offices only because the condition for registration is that you have an office in Abuja. They can go to Yanya and have a small shop. Or even some village parties in Bori and so on, and have to say that's Abuja. So they are registered. But I think we are going to put more stringent conditions so that we can now limit ourselves within a certain number of political parties, so that it can be managed, it can be trimmed. You remember when I'm sure with the television, all the media were able to cover the elections, the announcement of the election results of the presidential election. It took INEC 2 days, mentioning so many parties with 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, nothing like that. So it was waste of time and money. So I believe that we are bent on, the Nigerians are interested, as you said, to trim down this number of parties, and I'm telling you, we are prepared to do so. We are here to serve the interest of Nigerians, representatives of Nigerians, and the senator is the Senator of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. So what we are doing is for the interest of Nigerians, and we'll definitely do our best.
Mr. Tanko, I know that you have argued in the past before that as many parties as can flourish should be allowed to flourish. But you have heard the reasons he's given for us to, try and streamline the number of parties that we have. What are your thoughts on the justifications that are being given?
I'm a strong proponent for multi-political party system in Nigeria for a very long time and for so many reasons. Number one, it is a good idea that you sit down and think about how we can advance the cause of democracy in Nigeria. But to make a pronouncement on regard to the number of political parties in Nigeria, I think it's a little bit too hazy. And I say this with a lot of respect. When you say 5 political parties already, you've already determined, you've already made a decision as regard to what will happen to 200 million Nigerians' choice of their interests. Now, political parties in Nigeria need to be consulted. Is there any room for us to sit down and give ideas that are much better than the way you are thinking of 5 political parties? No. I thought probably there would have been... They need to be
consulted on what?
What I mean is that...
On their registration or their deregistration?
They are representative. The Senate is a representative of the people.
Indeed.
And indeed, when you are having issues with regard to how to advance a cause that their interest is in, they need to be talked to. Maybe they have much better ideas, like we have already postulated some other ideas as regard to proportional representation as solving the problem.
Okay, so you want the senators, let me get this straight, you want the senators to sit down with the political parties
normally when you are having a reform,
yes.
When you are having a reform, stakeholders must be consulted.
No, but let me explain to you on this aspect. When you are coming, there is condition after the election that if the Electoral Act clearly says parties will be registered when they fail to perform. So what I was saying, when I said to talk of 5 number, I have the basis. We have the analysis, we have the records that there are not more, there are over 70-something parties need to be registered, even after this immediate election. And what I'm saying is maybe after the court case, it means the election is over.
Are the conditions clear enough?
It is clear.
If indeed there are conditions...
We will do public hearing.
Yes.
Where I will consult Nigerians in the Senate, and then we invite all the stakeholders to come do another public hearing. But the condition on the Electoral Act clearly states, and the Constitution clearly states. So therefore, we'll be guided by the Constitution or by the Electoral Act. So it's not a matter, we will consult them when we are doing public hearing, because we invite every Nigerian, including the parties. And if these parties could work together and form solid parties, and even representation, when you are talking of parties, you need to be spread across. Distinguished, let me get this clearly. Are you saying that the Electoral Act, sorry, Mr. Tanko,
yes.
I'll come to you shortly.
Yes.
Are you saying that as the Electoral Act is today, it already clearly spells out the conditions for the registration of political parties? Yes, so why are we having this conversation, if it does? No, it is. We're just discussing the issues of the number of parties. Oh yes, I mean. Yeah, it is. The rule. The INEC has the powers to do that. Yes. But that should be after the elections. It's all over. Like the elections are over, but you have to wait for the court cases, because that may determine either some parties may get governorship candidate or state assembly house. So that is what we are waiting for now. But immediately after the elections or the tribunal cases are over, then the party, the INEC must now delist the register. But you see, what we don't like again is that when you deregister, the door is also open for you to register again. So we are trying to see how we can be able to put conditions, or at least a proposal, when we call a public hearing with the people, how we can improve the number. Because there is no basis, you say you register a political party, which is only a party that is a local government party or a state party, and you should ask you to go for a national election. I mean, so therefore we have to trim down, and we are working on that with the support of Nigerians. Well,
with regard to the issue of this registration, the political party, the election generally itself is still ongoing. There are court cases, just like as he said. And then we feel that we have been gagged. We have been intimidated.
The political parties?
Yes.
Why?
Yes, because if you look at it today, like on the 16th of November, you have an election that is going to take place even within the senators. 2 of these particular senators at a particular time were on the opposing side. This issue of confusing Nigerians has already been bedeviled in the existing so-called two major political parties. And they've been recycling themselves from one position to another at the disadvantage of other options. These options were not being openly and fairly given. They are not openly and fairly given. Just like he said, you can register a political party today and deregister in section 222 and subsection section 878, subsection 2 of the Electoral Act gave all of these rooms. So if you are talking about reform for progressive tendencies, all you need to do is for us to sit down and prefer better solution. Just like, as I said, we are thinking that it would have been better if we propose a proportional representation for elective position in Nigeria. That will give room for inclusivity.
What does that mean,
Proportional representation, which is being practiced in Canada, Togo, even Togo here, who have even larger political parties than us. Togo here has about 9 million people, and they have almost 120 political parties, even counting more. In fact, in Guinea, the
Sorry, you were explaining proportional representation.
Yes, I am. I'm giving relative example of some of these. Proportional representation means that seats and positions are being allocated based on percentage winning for political parties. For example, if there are 3 or let's say 5 seats, now you have 100 voters. That's 100%. So certain position, like if you have 20%, you are equal to having 1 seat. If you have 20%, you are equal to having 2 seats. And this works and gives inclusivity.
That is in the state house. In the state house of assembly,
federal assembly. Even if you sit down and agree on it, you can even go down to even executive position.
Even if you were to look at that,
yes.
If you were to look at, I'm sorry to laugh, but
no, go ahead.
If you were to look at the proportional representation, yes, which you are proposing,
yes,
if you are going to look at, say, presidential figures,
yes,
the votes that accumulate, some parties will not even get.
No. I agree with you in that regard. You see, it works perfectly well because there will no waste vote. People who believe in probably me, for example, will know if they vote and they are targeting like 20%. My party can mobilize and recruit members to that 20%.
Now,
because we know what was the percentage of the cumulative votes which your party got?
Now be,
for instance, I'm just asking, since you're making a case for proportional representation,
yes,
what was the percentage of the total votes that your party got?
No, you were here last time when you asked me. We have about 3,000 elections, which I told you I'm very, very proud of.
3,000 votes.
Yes, those ones. I'm
asking what is the percentage of that when you look at it in relation to all of the votes.
You have to make reference to the total registered voters at that time. You have to make reference of total voters, and at that time,
not of the total votes that came in.
At that time, no, it was the first past the post. In a proportional representation, let me land. In proportional representation, people would be interested in voting, and they know that that particular vote will not be a waste. We have a first past the post position here. If you vote for a political candidate, you are voting en masse and you believe that particular person, if he wins, like with the president won with 15 million, the next one will be about 11 million. And now that 11 is becoming a waste.
Let him land, sir.
Please. That means that 11 is a waste. Nobody counts them, they are not important. But in the proportional representation, that represents a block vote of people, and that will be represented accordingly. That way there will not be a waste vote. I can assure you that many of the political parties, if you practice an inclusive proportional representation, majority of them will mean certain percentage, and that will equivalent to being in that position. And the issue of this particular youth or not given opportunity will be erased. The issue of political nomadism or prostitution, as they call it, will completely be out of it. People will not be jumping from one political party to another. There will be clear-cut ideology and the less cost in spending. Majority of the people who are already in position here, who have to sell their property in order to be in position, will not sell it because people will be voting based on their conscience and their principle. That way we are thinking progressively. But if we continue to do this, what we continue to have is rolling all of these particular old candidates, and then those who have money are the only ones that can buy votes. And that will be to the disadvantage, and the democracy will not move.
I see the point that you're making.
Yes.
Because you're saying that, sorry, just a moment, distinguished. I see the point that you're making because you're also saying that it would also change it would encourage voters to go for parties. Because some people will say, who are the parties in this election? These other small parties don't matter because they would think their vote is a waste. I mean, you hear that a lot during the general elections. When you ask people, who are you voting for? Are you voting for any of the smaller parties? They will tell you, if I vote for them, my vote is going to be a waste. But if they know that, their vote will count in those smaller parties, there might be more votes accruing to the smaller parties. Is it something that we're going to consider distinguished?
I mean, he just mentioned that his party got about 3,000 votes.
Yes.
And 3,000 votes in relation to President Buhari that got 15 million votes or 11 million by the other party. What is the ratio? You find that it's plus 0.0 something. So it's negligible. So why don't we work and reduce the number of parties so that these 3,000 votes of his and another 3,000 for another party can be within these 5 political parties, and then there will be more competition.
Did you hear the point that he was trying to make?
He said presentation.
Yes, proportional representation. What he's saying is that, assuming we were practicing proportional representation,
we are not practicing that now.
That his party will get more votes will be higher because people will not be looking at, saying
even
I'm voting for this party is wasting my
11 million
votes.
votes of the other party is not a loss because they won election of governors, senators, House of Rep members. It's not a loss. So they are opposition party. And we are working to, I mean, they are members of the National Assembly, so it means they can do check and balances for the party. And that means if our party did well, then they will lose again. If we don't do well, they will win. So this is the way things work. You don't just say, because I've got 3,000 votes, I need to have a position of a minister or position of a permanent or something like that. I think that's not supposed to be the case. We are practicing American system of presidential system.
Is this winner-takes-all syndrome
it's
really,
not a matter of,
really
you find that if you go to some other states, when you go to others, you find that other parties have won election. So it's not like a winner-takes-all. And even in the Senate, we have a senator from YPP party. So that's not winner takes all.
You definitely know what I'm talking about by winner takes all. At the center, when the president wins, it is his party that has won. It is his party that dominates at the center. Of course, these other parties, they have won seats in their localities. They have won seats as governors. When a party wins at the state level, it is the party that wins at the state level that dominates the politics of the day. Oftentimes, you find out that the governor, perhaps the members of the National Assembly who also come from that state, will also be from the same party. That's usually what happens. Do you think that this is helping to grow our democracies, or are we having, like little monopolies, so to speak, of political parties at whatever levels that we have them? Do smaller parties really have a chance to break in?
Well, they have a chance to break in once at least they are within the limit of the criteria put for the elections. There is no need putting many political parties and you waste the taxpayers' money. That they go into elections, they get nothing. And you say, okay, let them be represented. But at state level, if they have done well, then certainly there should be representation. They maybe have a councillor, or they will have a chairman of a local government, or but you're talking of like commissioner, that's derivative, like the governor has the power to appoint anybody that he didn't pick, that from his party or even outside his party. Because when I was governor in 1991 or 92, I did an inclusive government. I had the SDP members as my commissioners, and I was an NRC governor. So I did an inclusive government. That was representation. But I didn't do that is because of the performance. That during the election, I had 33 House Assembly members. They had 32. So the difference is 1 or 2. So what I'm saying that is how you can now carry people on board. But when you don't perform, you cannot even win a councillor seat. You are saying let's have a government of representation. How can you be represented?
Well, there are going to be huge questions as to how that will work in the presidential system. But some people will say that perhaps in a parliamentary system it might be a lot easier to practice. However, would you also say that the smaller parties have set their goals too high? Because some people will accuse them of wanting to, we already know the demands that the Constitution places on whoever it is that will become president. That you must win 25% in at least 2/3 of the country, and you must get the most votes. And that is a tall order for most political parties. You need a lot of money, you need a structure, you need a machinery to be able to gather that amount of votes. A lot of political parties know from the get-go that they do not have this political machinery, yet they will say we are going for presidential elections.
Yeah.
That's what usually happens.
Yeah.
Would you say that they too have set their sights too high? Why aren't they starting from the grassroots?
No, not really, because from setting that particular goal of whatever, you see, when you want to achieve a target, you try to set a higher target so that what other things can come in. But if you set a lower target, you may not be able to meet it. With all due respect, all of us know what happens in Nigeria. The National Conscience Party was registered as a political party in 2003, while we announced ourselves in October 1st. We are one of the oldest, as I said earlier on. I'm giving a background. We won a seat in Ekiti State by the name of Adekoya Benson. But that gentleman was the only person in Ekiti State. And then he had to decamp to join the PDP based on one or two reasons, that he felt that they had not been carried along, they had not been giving him room. In fact, they deliberately gag him. So that is to say that we have the capacity of winning elections. And if we have the capacity of winning elections, but the criteria and the position, the processes that we're already therein, are they obtainable? They are definitely not. With all due respect, distinguished senator is from my state. I'm from Kano State. You can't expect me to run an election with distinguished senator in this particular location. It can't happen. I can't win. Not because I may not be popular, but I may not have the capacity to. But the capacity that I don't have is the resources that he has. And these resources may be compared to how each and everybody must have generated these particular resources compared to. So it's becoming heavily difficult.
Election is not a matter.
It continues to be heavy. The money that is being involved, you are talking about people who started from 10,000 naira, now we are going into billions of naira for a person to contest election. It's not as if that the political parties do not have that capacity, political capacity, but they don't have the resources, and it's deliberately so. Deliberately so at the disadvantage of others. So if we are fair, we should start thinking. It's not now. A situation happened. A member who happened to belong to a smaller political party won an election. He was enjoying the largesse. All of a sudden, the thing just cracked. No more. He started running back to this. So when they want to think, they should think about what is going to happen in future. We are thinking about a futuristic idea, but not saying that, look, let's continue with this first past the post position. The money that each and everybody generates, it cannot be compared, and the money that is used in electioneering is too heavy and does not produce new leaders.
Well, we're seeing on the screen right now the list of political parties in Nigeria, and the list, it's a really long list. I mean, 100 political parties. I think when we're looking at the ballot paper for the 2019 elections, it was ridiculously long, and it was also even more difficult. Now. Yes, it was also even more difficult for people with disabilities.
To
for
see
people,
even, not even people with disability, people even with glasses can't see clearly, because I can remember during the election, a lady came to me and said she wanted to vote Buhari, and why is Buhari? She cannot even see the picture. He can't, even me like this, I need my glasses to look through at the logos of other political parties. So there are too many for that. Definitely there are too many.
And if you agree, do you agree? Let me get your
that there are
opinion.
too many.
No, I did not agree.
Do you agree that there are too many?
No, I don't.
Yes,
I've given you an example. Even in the United States of America, they have more political parties than what you see.
But all the political parties do not participate in the presidential election.
The truth about it is that politics is, we learn politics internationally, but we need to practice it. We are practicing it locally. Things that can work for us, we can practice it. We are not saying that there should not be reform. Reform that can be adding advantage to the democratic process is very, very important. Even, I can give you an example, smaller countries who are smaller in population and all, next door neighbors, Benin and Togo, they have more political parties than even Nigeria.
So, but gentlemen, we have to take a break. When we come back, I want to take you up on the fact that you said you cannot win Senator Gaya in your constituency or in the state. We'll come back and examine why when we come back from this break. Please stay with us. Or Senator Kabiru Gaya, Chairman, Senate Committee on Independent National Electoral Commission, and Mr. Yunusa Tanko, former presidential candidate of the National Conscience Party. They are still with us in the studio. I understand that my colleagues in Lagos have questions for them. Gentlemen.
Fine.
Senator Gaya, let me take you up on, when you said, if you look at the collation the last time out, it took INEC almost 2 days or thereabout. But much as, yes, that was the case, but there are those who also believe that it wasn't just because of the amount of political parties that we have, but because it was collated manually. So if there were electronic voting, for instance, don't you think that that would have made it a lot faster, and then we won't happen the amount of political parties that we have?
Well, I seem to agree with you on one section of it, that the delay, the time taken was not necessarily on the party, but that's another factor. The delay on the announcement, or the time it took for the announcement, the political parties definitely were a factor. And when you talk of electronic voting, yeah, another thing we have to understand, when you talk, like, there are two things, either electronic voting or electronic transmission of results. Which that way, you know, happened even in the United States of America, where we had problems on that, on direct transmission. So therefore, we are saying that it's not really based on the fact that it's because the delay, I mean, because of the, not using electronic voting. But we have, definitely we are going to improve on our election process, and this is why we're saying we're going to do reforms on that aspect.
If, with this amendment, some of the proposals, are you also going to consider how to ensure we are able to collate results faster, so that people will ensure that, look, what they voted for is the way it's coming out?
Indeed, the essence of reforms are to make life easier for the people, is to make the electorates easier, the election to be easier, but at least free, fair, and in such a way that people will be comfortable that the election is free and fair. So therefore, we are going to do public hearings, and I'm sure your views and views of Nigerians will be accommodated in this aspect, so that definitely we improve the system. And that's why we amend the act. We always amend acts in view of the Nigerians or the Nigerians' demand. And where we have problems, we now come back to it and amend it in such a way that we may not have problems. So definitely the issue of trying to speed up the election, the results too, and so on. Even the issue of, we're also thinking of the issue of where you say people should not move throughout the day when there is no movement. It's wrong. People should be allowed to do their business. When they vote, they can go and do their business, at least within the confined areas. So that by so doing, you are deferring people from movement, and it's wrong. So I think we'll try to see how ways which we can improve or modify the Electoral Act for the interest of Nigerians.
Mr. Tanko, let me ask you this now. Well, you are a proponent of having as many political parties as possible, but the resources that we deploy, it's still huge. Even if there were going to be electronic collation and voting, there will still be resources, provisions made for those 91 political parties. How do you suggest we reduce those expenses?
Chamberlain, truth about this, democracy is not cheap. That's the fact about it. And then when you use your resources, you use it judiciously in such a way that the maximum benefit will be for the interests of the people. I keep on harping on some issues that regard to the finances that's already been expended already. As you can see, what is being expended even in the legislature, as it were. It's huge, quite all right. But then, how do we justify it with regard to the dividends of democracy that has been given to the people? When we want to make laws, we can make laws that is at least no political party is being given a single dime as today. They're not giving any political party any money. So I don't see where the registration or the registration of political party will have helped in any way, because we are not taking money from the federal government, yet we employ people. We give a lot of people. You can imagine 91 political parties giving employment to Nigerians who are not working. So they are adding, we are even adding more, we are adding more to the system than taking from the system. But the people that are only taking more from the system are trying to be the one who we give back to, are the one trying to make sure that we do not exist at all. And that is unfair. Because
Tanko,
we
previously
give room for electioning, we give, hello?
Previously, INEC was giving money to political parties, and as such, we had parties that were registered primarily to collect this money. It was only recently that that changed.
No, that's
Yes, let's justify that. We say political parties were being given money. And Chamberlain, you want to ask, the last money that was given to the political party that was already being kicked against was 60 million naira to one political party. And that is 3 times what another member in the Senate or the Federal Republic of Nigeria takes at his own take-home. How do you compare that? 6 million. and you expect that political party to run an election against somebody who has one of them, and if they have many of them, multiple, how many do you compare them to run against each other? It's not possible. So we are undermining the existence of political parties, and their existence actually depends on our democracy. So we are not asking. In fact, at a particular time, we are even proposing that we say statutory funding of technical funding for political parties. You will have seen them performing more. In fact, they will have added more value to the system than the way they are at the moment now. So it is unfair to justify probably 6 million naira as against 13 million and 15 million naira as against the political parties, which is a complete statutory institution which represents the interests of Nigerians in different states of the Federal Republic of Nigeria.
I think before we...
I'd like to bring in Senator Tanko just a moment, or Senator Kabiru Gaya, pardon me, but I'd like you to respond first to what he said before I put in my question. Okay, well, I guess I'll just put in the question and allow you to respond. So, all right, so the question is now, instead of deregistering parties, which has been on for a while, some say, why don't you have some sort of roundtable with these so-called smaller political parties and ask, why aren't you performing well? What challenges did you face? So that we don't end up with an oligopoly, for example. Is that something you're also considering?
Yeah, you see, let me just say, give a response to what he said earlier, that the parties were given funds to run an election. And most of the parties were running to come and collect even the 6 million. Because those parties, they have only an office in Abuja, and not even central Abuja, in any village in Abuja village. So that 6 million can do a lot for them. For example, so what I'm saying is whatever aspect it is to improve the situation, we are prepared to do so. The issue of the issue raised now is that why should we... Sorry, I didn't get his question.
Go ahead.
Well, the question was, instead of, looking at deregistering these parties, are we having some sort of meeting with the over 90 parties that didn't perform well during the elections to say, you know what, let's sit down. What challenges did you have? So we don't end up with an oligopoly.
For us even to have a guideline, to have a guideline for registering a political party is that we make sure that these parties must have performed. And that's correct. You don't just give a person without who failed the exam. There is a condition for that. So we are going to also do public hearing. So when we do public hearing, we invite them. They put up their advice or information or even the presentation. But definitely, it's just like an exam you are marking. When somebody passes, definitely he passes. If he fails, he fails. So what do you expect that a party, like what's happening in Bayelsa, how many governors, how many candidates are running for governorship in Bayelsa and Kogi State? Most of these parties, if not 2 parties or 3, they don't have even councillor in that state. So why do you have to waste taxpayers' money in so doing? And that if any party, the name or logo is omitted, that means that there will be a real run of election. That's cost another expenditure again all over. So therefore, I believe the registration of political parties is there in the Constitution, is there in the Electoral Act, and we're going to use that law and then or act and be able to decide which parties should be allowed to continue for the interest of Nigerians.
Okay, now, Mr. Tanko, you listened to Senator Gaya. He made mention of coming elections in Bayelsa and Kogi. And in some of the states, we've seen smaller political parties align with the big political parties. And some give the argument that, these smaller so-called political parties are used to, on one hand, divide the votes of other parties, and you see them adopting candidates. So don't you think this is also another argument for this, deregistering move?
Is another argument.
When you see political parties or individuals running for elections, that's to tell you that people are not happy with the existing government. If they are, they wouldn't have even come out to contest in the first place. And when you talk about aligning or not aligning with political parties, that is no democratic culture. Anywhere in the world, you can decide to align with somebody that you prefer, has maybe a superior argument, or you think has a better chance of working with you, or you have the same principle with you or ideology that you think he can deliver, so you align with it. That is how political parties evolve, not the registration. And I give you an example. The 5 political parties, which majority of the parties who are enjoying at today, evolved with time. Remember, it was a CPC, it was an AMPP, It was a new PDP. It was an ABGA. It was that came together to form a political party. That is how political party evolve. But when you gag them, you deny them of the opportunity of evolving with time, you are only killing democracy. Democracy does not have that particular history anywhere in the world. So leaving them or not leaving them, you can prefer ways of which they can improve. Just like as you said, I agree with you totally when you say that why not? Nobody has ever even done it. To say, let's sit down and talk. This political party, and interestingly, the people who are kicking against the decision of this political party are the ones that are using the political parties the most. Because they know their strength, so they use them for their own benefit. It's only when they lose out that they'll be looking for an alternative. So you see, they are the more beneficiary of this particular issue of the political party existence. Believe me, they will come out even crying after they release it because they will not have anywhere to run to. So why do you go
Dr.
through
Tanko,
that particular pain and pang?
Dr. Tanko, let me quickly follow up on that question or your response. There's also been talks that some of these smaller political parties are actually appendages of the bigger political parties, and some say that these smaller political parties were just formed so that over time they will just put them all together under one political party. How do you respond to that?
I am not INEC. So if you want to make an investigative registration, you need to find out who was registering the political party. So when you accuse them, it's possible. Any individual can decide to register a political party as long as if he meets the criteria. And that is why we are saying that what an exercise in futility that we're trying to embark on. The moment you deregister, the same law gives you room to register again. No. So even if you deregister 100, you could have registration of 200 political parties. So why don't you make the ones that are existing more effective and have their efficacy performing within the confines of the law so that they can advance the democracy rather than giving room for a new one? So if we want to make a reform, what we are talking about is reform. Let's agree we are making a reform. We all agree that we need a reform. In fact, to tell you the truth, 2011 or so, when former President Yar'Adua agreed that his own election was flawed, Justice Mohammed Uwais committee was set up, 22-man committee was set up, and they gave good suggestions. Majority of that suggestion that was given by Justice Mohammed Uwais included this particular proportional representation. But where is it now? They put it under the dustbin because it is not beneficial to them.
Before we veer off the conversation on political parties, let's. I think Senator Gaya would like to respond to that. Please go ahead, Senator.
You see, when you talk of the issue of alliance or political parties, I have an example of one of those states. I don't want to mention the states in particular, but out of the 28 or 30 aspirants or candidates for the governorship of political parties in contesting in a state, 5, let's say 15 go to one side, to one of the candidates, and another 20 goes to another candidate, which means out of the 15, 5 candidates have all been showed an alliance on both the 2 candidates of 2 political parties. So which means just like trading. So therefore, we need to trim down. That's one aspect. The other issue which he's talking about is the issue of the number of political parties also. I think all I'm saying is that we have our reasons, and they will do public hearing. They will come. We will invite them. We'll talk together and see which ways could be possible. But I believe that the law must be respected and the law must be obeyed. And the Act is clearly saying this. And immediately after the election, INEC will have to now give out the name of registered political parties. The other issue which is talking that the door is also open for registration again, we are going to look at that law because we don't allow that we now register and then tomorrow 200 political parties come up again for registration. No, we have to give conditions for registrations. Like political party must have a senator, a governor, and so on and so on. The condition will be more tougher than what it is. Or have offices in various states. Like, how can you have a political party with national outlook have only office in Abuja? They should have office everywhere, at least in all the states of the federation, if not 2/3 of the states of the federation. That should have been one of the conditions. And secondly, they should have offices in at least 1/3 in every of a local government in the state. So therefore, there must be representation. We talk of a national party. If this party is national, it has to spread nationally. What do you expect that the party is saying is a registered party and has office in just one location? And I agree with my brother here. His party is about 25 years old. So I believe the party is even older than PDP, APC, and all other major political parties. But APC and PD were able to win election for presidential for APC, and then governors and so on for PDP. So his own party should, if cannot perform well, let it join us, so we work as a team. Because I believe there is no need having too many political parties and they cannot perform.
All right, Dr. Tanko, let me bring this back to you. You know, in all of this conversation that we have had, no one has, you know, actually spoken about how this number of political parties and the cumbersomeness of the electoral process, we haven't really talked about how it is for the voter with the, look at the ballot paper and all of that. Don't you think that if we reduce the number of political parties, it'll help your voter to, you know, be better educated to perform during the elections?
The reason why we consider a lot of things on our own part, because we are very much concerned about the confusion that is happening in the mind of the electorate. They want to vote for a candidate, but they are not sure even where the candidate actually belongs to. Is it a political party A that he belongs to in the morning, or the political party that he belongs to in the evening? The way they changed from one political party, that was the reason why we are talking about this particular issue of proportional representation. Then two, we are talking about the electronic system of voting. That way we are advancing. Remember, at a particular point in time, even in Nigeria, we go to the banks with checks and all of those things. Nowadays, we don't do that anymore because there was an advancement on it. Even when we use our analog way of calling each other on phone, that time there has been advancement on it. But on the political party level system, there has been a gradual and slow movement. Because people do not want the advancement because it will deny them or probably give room for a newer or better people who can reform the government. So that is the reason why the electronic system could have been used in India and other countries. But we are always talking about that. Is it practicable?
Yeah, but
when you come
hang on, like, Mr. Tanko, hang on. Let me ask Senator Gaya, in addition to your response, also respond to this. Number one is, now, when you will go ahead with these amendments, are we going to, number one, stop political parties or stop candidates, politicians, from moving from one political party to the other? And if you now cut down on these political parties, expectedly, INEC budget should reduce. Don't you think so?
Of course, the budget should reduce. The taxpayers' money should be used for other purposes. But how can you go and now print paper, a large size paper like this for a list of presidential candidates? It's too much. It's so cumbersome. Like the question you just mentioned earlier, that is too cumbersome for the list. That's why I want to trim down. It's even reduce the taxpayers' money. Like when you print one paper like this and big size, you are going to multiply it in 25 million number. That's a lot of money. So therefore, that's one thing. And then the issue of alliance of these political parties, we should really consider their performance. And when they have failed, I mean, most of them have failed, so therefore, if they need to be relevant in politics, I think they should be where they should work as a team. And maybe all the other 90 or 75 political parties should come together and say, okay, let's form a strong opposition. That would have been better than having smaller parties and they trade for them. Somebody told me one story recently that he contested with about 36 candidates. And all of them said, about 33 of them said they are going to join that team. That's a notorious candidate. And they said, sir, if you win election, give us the position for either civil defense or road safety or something like that. So somebody running for a senator is asking for that kind of position. Why should he even have another? Why should he be in a political party? Senator, should you just support the senator, work together with him?
Sorry to jump in. The second part of the question, shouldn't we make it tougher for politicians to move from one political party to the other and make it easier for voters to recall politicians who don't perform?
We are going to do public hearings, so we get your views on that aspect. But sadly, you cannot stop somebody from one party to another because it's his right, it's his freedom to choose where to be. So you cannot do that. But you know, even parties have rules that if you move into, if you decamp to another party, it takes you a year before you go for any election or something like that. So there are conditions by the parties guideline in that so that you don't move today and be voted into office in the next day. So therefore, these conditions, we also look at it in the Electoral Act I'm fine, and at least give it room for people that work together for the interest of Nigeria.
These are rules which parties, we have seen them consistently waive those rules. And we know that politicians will never make laws that would not favor them. I mean, we have been told before now, I think then he was Deputy Senate President, Ike Kwerimadu, say that how can we be talking about recalling, you know, how can senators be making rules that will make it easier for people to be able to recall their members of the National Assembly? That's not going to happen. Yeah. So are we at the mercy of the politicians?
Oh, no, why not that? Because you see, like issue of recall, the conditions for recall, is there. So unless there are reasons, some people...
They are impossible conditions.
No, but
that's basically what we're saying.
They are impossible, maybe purely impossible. But when somebody failed and people wanted to recall him, because otherwise we'll be doing recall every other day. And that means I will be going for election every other day. Once somebody didn't like, the top people at the top don't like him, they'll push people to recall him. So you have to also think of that condition. There must be continuity in the system. Otherwise, you just vote senators in office or governor or whatever. After about some few months, he'll be recalled, because when they call, you make the recall much easier. So there we have to make it difficult in such a way that people mean that recall. They are prepared to go all that way down to make sure that, they recall that candidate. So it's not really, we don't just allow things that easy, like say you can recall a governor, you can recall a senator, you can recall a House member, or even recall state assembly member. It's not that easy, because it means that we have to now put taxpayers' money, go back for election, and all other candidates will come in for elections, screening, and so on. By the time you go to that, by the end of it, will go to about a year or so in that process.
Okay, let me quickly ask Mr. Tanko this. You have said that, you know, you cannot contest against him in your constituency. You wouldn't win. But, you know, you have been at the federal level now for a couple of years.
That's right.
Are you just in the race for the fun of it? If you're not able to actually pull your weight in your local constituency.
I only gave an example as regard to what may hinder me of winning that particular election as regard to the issue of resources that are being used against others.
But the resources would also be more at the federal level.
Because he's running for president.
It'll be more at the federal level.
We're talking about, I'm just giving an analogy as regard to how people who have already in position take so much advantage as against the others who do not have. That is just the analogy. It's not as if probably winning. I can stand election. If I win, I win. If people prefer me to win election, why not? And if the chances are fair, just like you said, because look at the, for example, of what he just mentioned, as regard to the issue of laws that are being made. People really make laws for their own interests. And so, let me give an example. Has it ever been said that if you lose or if you decamp from one political party, you lose your seat? Because already you went into that politicking with a mandate of another political party. But we have not made it a rule that the moment you are changing, you leave that particular seat and recontest with another manifesto.
It's a rule that is there, but it's never enforced. It's never enforced. Why?
These are some of the things that we need to...
The rule exists.
Yes.
That once you leave that party, you now lose your seat.
Yes, it's never enforced.
And then the person that interprets the rule,
yes,
it is when the presiding officer of the house agrees that, yes, that there is no faction of the political party. You know, there may be faction within political parties, and you are free to remain in the office as long as there is factions.
And somehow...
And with those factions, that's why members stay. Because there will be factions in those political parties, and they still stay in the office. Wow. As senators or house or whatever.
It starts with politics, it ends with politics. We have to thank both of you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Senator Kabiru Gaya is the Chairman, Senate Committee on the Independent National Electoral Commission. And we also had with us Mr. Tanko, who was a former presidential candidate at the National Conscience Party. Well, that's it for this segment. Sunrise Daily continues in a moment with another topic. Don't go away.